Okay, welcome to the 13th grade. Let's talk about the different ways that we can make money. All right, guys. So just want to follow up as we normally do in the head of all of every new video, just talk about sort of where we came from or where we've been so far. Up until this point, we've talked about a great deal about the mindset that you need to push you past or to keep your mind right or keep you centered and focused on this path of becoming financially free. We talked about how hard it can actually be in pursuing that. And just to be to clear with you, the path or the plan to get you from A to B to move you from nothing to something in that very short period of time, the execution of that and what we're going to be talking about here going forward is actually really quite simple. There's not that much magic to it. You don't have to have a PhD to be successful. What I'll say to you though is the decision to take those steps is actually what's the hardest. And that's why we talked about you need to have a really great sense of circle of influence, and you need to have a very, very strong why. A really great example I think I can give you is that if you ever see these guys and they have, they're completely ripped, great, six pack abs or whatever, you could be thinking to yourself, I want that. That looks really great. And so, you're like, oh, I got to join a gym and I got to go do those things. And you head in and you realize, like, in order to get the six pack abs, you're going to have to change the way that you eat, in some sort of diet, whether it be lower sugar, lower carbs, whatever particular is. You're probably going to have to spend a good amount of time in the gym. Might be 3 days a week, might be 5 days a week. Everyone's different. But the point is that you're going to have to take on a certain amount of pain, both in changing your diet and also in exercises to get that particular outcome. And so if you kind of just were looking at it on Instagram or something and you're like, oh, this guy's really fit. I'd love to be really fit. You weren't really serious about it. There wasn't a really main reason why you wanted to get fit. You probably wouldn't necessarily stick with it. And a lot of people, what do? New Year's resolutions. They go in, they sign up for a gym, they stick 30 days. Maybe they're getting a little bit of results, but the pain that they're having to go through to get to that end result it just it just doesn't make sense to them. They're like, it's not worth me to take on this pain to get this particular pleasure thing because I don't really care about this pleasure thing. In this case, would be fitness. If, however, you were like on your deathbed, and something catastrophic happened, and the doctor was like, "Listen, if you don't lose, 30 pounds or something like that, you're gonna have a heart attack and die in the next 6 months." That could be a really big motivator to get you to actually to move, right? So that's a very big why. In financing, remember we talked about the action that you take and the results that you get is sometimes, can be years and years and years. So that why that you have and why you actually want to be successful has to be strong. Same with the fitness. If you're just online and you're seeing a couple Lamborghinis and people with nice watches and you're like, oh, I'd like to have that. I'm not quite sure, to be honest with you, if that's a big enough why. And that's where a lot of these people go in, they sign up for these online courses and how to do whatever day trading, but they never spend the time and the energy it really takes. Um, you need to have a really strong why, whether it be the catastrophic moment happened and you're taking on a bunch of pain financially that you're like, I just have to do something different. Whether you're late in your career and you realize I have no retirement and you're very, very scared about it. You need to have that sort of pain or pleasure sort of sensor in your mind to again change you to create the action. If you do, then I can assure you, you taking the action and taking the results in here are going to put you in a much, much better place. The degree of your financial, stability or financial success is going to depend on how well you execute, how much you're committed to it, how much you follow along, the changes that you make in your life. The more things you alter and change to get closer to this plan that is very clear and concise and how to sort of become wealthy and financially stable, the more successful you're going to do. If you go in, 50-50 and half, kind of you do things, then you may not even get, a whole lot of results. So really would encourage you as you go forward, if you've not done so already, get a big why. Remember, the retirement is simply a math problem. We know we need to accumulate a certain amount of income or have a certain amount of income coming in so that we can, quit our jobs, go do whatever we want, whenever we want, for as long as you want. So, without further ado, I want to talk to you about, and it sounds interesting, but like, how do we actually how do we actually make money? You know, is it, it might seem obvious, but you'll follow me along. There are two ways that you can make money. The first one is the obvious, and most of us do it. But we work. In exchange for that work, we make some money. Okay, and that makes sense. We go to our job, it's 9 to 5, whatever. We clock in, we work 40 hours, we get 20 bucks an hour, whatever it is. We get a check at the end of it. Work equals money. That makes a lot of sense. And I think for the most part, for most people, whether you may not be thinking about it, this is also easy for you to understand. You can also invest and make money. So investing and making money is about taking a lump sum of money that you have, could be 10 bucks, could be 100,000, doesn't really matter. But you're taking that and you're putting that into something as an investment. Could be a solo 401k, an IRA, could be a Roth, could be a rental property, could be another business, whatever it is. But if you invest something, you're not necessarily really having to exchange your time for money. You really just put your money in there, and your money has grown because you get a return on that investment. And so you've gotten money from that. And so there's a very famous, book out there, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. It is a staple to anyone that's trying to understand, financial freedom and building wealth and all of that. If you haven't read it already, please go do so. I want to talk about the cash flow quadrant, which comes from Robert Kiyosaki's book, as it relates to my journey and sort of how I followed this and how I wish I would have done something, some things a little bit differently. And how I think by maybe you doing things a little bit differently or thinking about doing things in a certain way can actually get you to the finish line of achieving fire a lot quicker. As a baseline, Robert Kiyosaki talks about there are four ways to basically that people make money. And we kind of just went over them a little bit. But let's talk further. You can be an employee, right? So an employee is just, you're working in a 9 to 5 job or whatever. You can have a startup, you can be a self-employed person. So let's just take in the case of a plumber, if you're a plumber, you're working for a plumbing company, right? If you're self-employed, you have all the certifications, you have the ability, licenses, whatever that you need, but you're actually just kind of going out on your own. Someone comes in, they want, something fixed, you're the one that's going out there to the home and actually completing it. Then there's the third, which is maybe the next level up, which is the business owner. And a business owner is someone that actually might still work in the business, might still do their own work, but they're actually hiring employees, right? And so you have people that are working for you. Maybe they're generating a certain amount of money, you're generating a certain amount of money, but it's not just a self-employed thing where it's just you, the self, right? You actually have other people. And then there's the last one, which is the investor status. And the investor status is someone that doesn't do any of those. They don't have a 9 to 5. They don't have an employees. They're not going out to take calls. They literally just kind of took their money and maybe they invested in the plumbing business to help whoever was working, the president, CEO at the time, to expand or hire employees or just give them the cash flow that they needed. The important part on here, and what Robert Kiyosaki wants you to understand, is that as an employee, you're exchanging your time for money. Okay. Meaning if you don't go and clock in 9 to 5, you're not getting a paycheck, right? So you're exchanging your time for money. As you move over and you become self-employed, you're actually still exchanging your time for money. In that case, is you might be just exchanging your time for more money. So as a plumber, you may have been, giving out invoices to customers. Maybe you charged them $100. You realize that you were only getting, $30 an hour. And so there was a margin there. And you're like, wait a minute, if I wasn't making $30 an hour and I was making a full invoice amount, I would be well off. So you decide to go be, self-employed. That self-employed person is still working. They're probably still working 40 hours a week. Maybe they're working a little bit more, but instead of making maybe $30 an hour, they could be making $60 an hour, $100 an hour. They're making a lot more. As you transition to the business side of things, right, you may still be exchanging some of your time for money, right? Because you might be both the business owner and also working at the same time. But the shift in being a business owner is that you have employees that are working for you, and those employees are making you money. So you're still invoicing customers $100. You were taking the full amount as a self-employed, but now you're actually giving a portion of that to your employee as a business owner, and you're basically full circle. You were once an employee, you did self-employment, now you're a business owner, and now you have employees. So it kind of went that full circuit. In investing, or as an investor in that quadrant, the concept there is it falls off time equals money. So employee time equals money, and self-employed time equals more money. In business, time equals spending, developing employees. Employees equals money, but it's still time equals money. As an investor, it's really just your money equals money. And so we know if we're trying to achieve FIRE, we're trying to hit the financial independence with the ability to retire early, we're trying to have enough cash flow coming in. What we're really trying to look for is our ability to take ourselves out of the equation. And what Robert Kiyosaki says is the only way you can do that is to become an investor, right? And so as an investor, your money makes money. So that way you don't have to, you get your time back, and your time you can then spend doing whatever you want for whatever you want for as long as you want. If this doesn't make quite sense and you haven't watched the previous videos, please, 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 I'm going to say this every video. You have to go back and watch lesson 1, 2, 3 and watch it all the way through because they all build on one another. So, in talking about my own experience, this is what most people do, and this is how it works. For I would say for most people is you start off as an employee. So you go to high school, you graduate, maybe you go to college, or like in the instance of a plumber, you go to vocational school for 2 years. You get the licenses, whatever you need to do to become a plumber. And then you work there for a certain period of time. And as you work there, you potentially get really good at your job. And if you just have an entrepreneur spirit, you do what I just talked about earlier, is you kind of start to see the invoices, and you're like, wait a minute, I see that they're billing for $100 of labor, but I'm only getting $30 because you understand the mathematics. And you say to yourself, I want to make the jump. I want to take the risk. I want to go do my own thing because I want to reap more of the reward of my efforts, right? And so you hear sometimes people in politics, when financing and work is political, but they're like, the CEO is getting rich off of my effort. True, but they're also taking a lot of risks there too. We're not going to get too much into it. But as a self-employed, you might say, I no longer want to put my effort to make someone else rich, be owner of that company, so I'm going to go do my own thing. And so usually as you get experience, you start your own job, you get your own thing, you are self-employed. If you're successful being in self-employed and you are able to say generate leads or find new customers, and you're able to service those customers, and you get really good reviews or whatever the business is that is successful, you then probably in most cases becomes so busy that you actually can't either take on more customers, or you get to the point where you're like, I gotta hire a helper, I gotta hire someone else. And that's where you become a business owner. You generally go, okay, let me hire another plumbing firm, a company, and I'm going to give another plumbing employee, and I'm going to give him some of the jobs. I'm going to take some of the jobs. And if you're successful in doing that and successful in managing that one person, sometimes that can translate to 2 people, 3 people, 4 people, 5 people, 10, 20, 100. It can go as far as you want. As a business owner, without fail, even if you're really successful and you're making $1 million a year, you probably have a lot of overhead. At some point in time, you probably realize and you say to yourself, listen, I'm never going to be able to retire because I'm always having to run this business. Even if you operate a business that you're kind of out of, so we owned restaurants, for example, and I had a general manager that was running the business, and I had a whole staff and all that kind of stuff. I was always still in it. There was always still the risk, or the monetary risk of large lease, large contracts, all that kind of stuff. So for me, it's like even though I wasn't there necessarily every single day, and I wasn't directly transitioning time for money, I still always had my foot in the door. Like if I'd go on vacation or something, we'd leave to go to Europe for a couple months. There was always something that happened. I always had to look at the sales numbers. There's again, just always a one toe that was in it. So what I ended up wanting to do is I was like, listen, I made a lot of good money for this restaurant. I've done well. I want to sell it, and I want to take that money, and I need to do something else that I'm not so time consuming, and it doesn't take up so much of my time because again, I want to retire. So what do? We take the money that we've made from employee, from startups, from business, and as we've kind of grown that, and then we say, okay, I'm just going to be an investor. So maybe I can invest in another business. Maybe I could, put that money in a 401k or IRA, as I may have done over time. But the point is that I switch from business, or I switch from exchanging my time and money to needing to exchange money for money. Because again, it is truly the only way that you can retire. Retirement, financial freedom is a math problem. When your monthly expenses are paid for by the amount of money that you have coming in, and you're not having to do work to get that money, then you're retired. And so how that looked like for me in sort of in my journey is, in my 20s, I started out as an employee. I worked for a company, and exactly the same. After working for that company for a certain period of time and contributing a lot and seeing that company grow off my hard work, I decided to say, in my 30s, what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually go start my own job. The difference is that when I went and started my own job, I was an employee, and my own job, my self-employment, was actually like a side, let's call it a side hustle. So I called it, I had a 9 to 5 and I had a 5 to 9. And I worked much later than 5 to 9, but you get the point. And so as a self-employed, because I didn't want to lose my income that I had from my employee because that was very stable for me. But I said, hey, maybe I can go to my own and I can do a business. And if this business grows large enough and that business then makes enough that I pay for my income as an employee, then I can leave and I can just go run this business. And that's exactly what I did. So I worked there for a while. And my 5 to 9 ended up being a lot more successful. I ended up leaving my main corporate job, and that 5 to 9 became my major business. However, I realized that that wasn't never going to be enough. The scale of that business wasn't going to be what I wanted to. I wanted to get into something else, and I wanted to do something about called diversification as the way I was making money. So I went and instead of just doing that business, I went and I actually was not an investor, but I went and started a brand new business while at the same time my self-employment that I had, I was then making that into a business as well. So two things at the same time, not to confuse you. So I was an employee. I started my 5 to 9. That was going really well. I started to hire employees there. Those employees, so that became a business itself. And at the same time, I used the money I was making from that self-employment that turned into a business, all of that amount of money. And not thinking about it, I went and I started another business. And that business was the restaurant I just talked to you about. I took a whole bunch of money, about $1 million or so. I put into a business, and that business initially started off immediately as me as CEO, president, whatever, and me having tons of employees. So that wasn't something I graduated into or gradually went into my experiences. I just basically moved right to it. So I had two businesses going. Through the grace of just a couple of mentors and through another business that my wife was doing that in real estate, we came across somebody and they said, hey, I see you got this business over here, you got the restaurant, everything's going well. What are you doing with taxes? Like, what are you doing to create generational wealth so you don't have to keep doing that? In my mind at the time was like, well, this is what I'm doing. I'm doing business. This is how I make money. And I was introduced to a whole pathway that changed my life at that particular time. And it was like, no, 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 no. What you need to be doing is taking your fruits from that and putting it into the investor quadrant. Because if I never got the money into the investor quadrant, I was never going to be able to leave because these two businesses were taking up monster amounts of my time. I'm talking about working 7 a.m. to 1 o'clock in the morning every day for 5 or 6 years, like constantly working. The money was good, but it was like, how is he ever going to get out of it? I could have maybe sold the businesses, whatever, but that person's like, no, you got to understand the cash flow quadrant. You need to understand the investor, and that was the shift, and that's where I've really started to kind of go down this pathway of investing, and then again, we're going to continue to build on that. The time for that was 20s to 30s, from my 30s to my 40s, my 40s to my 50s, and I head into 50s where I'm really becoming a strong investor. I probably made that switch a little bit earlier. I made that switch around when I was in my late 30s or early 40s, but that's kind of general the theme. If I had not met that mentor who said, hey, you need to make this switch, I probably would have just continued down operating those businesses and woke up when I was 65, 70, just with a bunch of money, just like earn a life and consume style, and never been working towards the investor side. And this is my point. Like you can make a ton of money, but if you're never making the shift to going, I need to keep putting that money into something else so I can stop doing what I'm doing right now, you're going to work your entire life. So you can be a physician, you can be a doctor and wake up at 65 and never have any money. You can be a business owner and wake up at 65, 70 and not have any money because the money you're making, you're kind of just spending it, you're moving along, and you're never investing the things you need to do to get to that investor side. And so, kind of a recap here. If you work, you're going to make money. Okay, we've covered that. If once you get money, or let's say you need to work to make money, once you have money, you take that money and you put that money to work for you so that you get more money. Okay. And work equals money, money invested equals financial freedom. So that makes sense to you. So if I'm working, I'm going to make some money. If I my money is going to make me more money, so that money invested makes me more money. It's just not money equals more money, but money invested makes more money. So hopefully that makes sense to you. If I take that money and it never gets invested, it never makes more, and I never get to financial freedom. So what I would do differently, and we'll go into more in depth in this, but look at the cash flow quadrant. What I should have been doing the entire time is when I started out in my 20s as earning income, I should have put that money into an investment. And what I should have done is I should have taken, as I moved from an employee, I still should have probably moved to self-employment. But as I started to make that self-employment money, I should have put that into an investor. And as a self-employed, I may have then expanded and hired employees and become a business owner, but all of that money should have been investor. And if I would have done that early on, those investments would have compounded and appreciated, and to the point where, or if you do that to the point where you can end up reaching that financial freedom number a heck of a lot quicker. Okay. Um, if you stick on employee and then maybe a self-employed and maybe a business owner and you're never pouring stuff into the investor side, you can end up working again. You can end up working your entire life and not necessarily getting anywhere. The reason for this, and this is the cardinal rule, is the building wealth formula. Okay, is earned income. So you need to have a good way to make earning income times your return on investment on that income times time equals money, right? More or more money. If I earn income and I'm not getting a good return on investment, and I can put the money in there forever. It doesn't matter. I'm not really going to have too much money. If I have earned income and have a really great return on investment, but I have a very short period of time, meaning, I had made a good amount of money. I put it now in the stock market at age, 50, because I realized, hey, I'm going to retire. When I retire, I'm 65. I might get a really good, nice return on investment, but I don't have enough time because the difference between 50 and 65 is 15 years. If I put that in when I was earlier, when I was in 20s, that's that time component makes the money that I have a lot more. So the idea here is you make as much money as you possibly can. And I would say you retain as much money as you possibly can, not necessarily just earn it. Um, you try to put things into places that get you the highest return on investment, and you should try to do that as early as possible, or keep the money in there for as long as possible. If you do those three things, you will grow that nest egg that you need again to pursue retirement. I want to show you a couple examples of this. Here's a good example, and I want to put some math behind this. So I'm going to show you a couple examples of this, and actually really put some numbers behind it. Um, Work equals money. So let's just talk about this. If I make $25 an hour and I work 40 hours a week, I'm going to make about $1,000 a week. Assuming I save 10% a week, $100 a week times 52 weeks times 35 years is $182,000 saved. Meaning, I make $1,000, I took $100 out and I put it in a fishbowl. I just put it in a bucket, and I just kept doing that every single week. I never did anything else with it. I just put it in a bucket, right? And I did that for 35 years. I have $182,000 saved. If I take those weekly savings and I invested them, so instead of just putting them like under safe or putting them in an account, not getting any return whatsoever, I would have and an 8% return, which is a modest return if you just put it like into a stock, IRA, VOO or S&P index fund, whatever, I would have 182,000. I would have $785,000 at the end of that period, that same period, through the work of something called compounded interest. And what compounded interest means is that I'm basically making $100. If I make 10% on it annually, that $100 is going to be $110 after that year. The next year, if I earn the same 10%, I'm not earning 10% on 100,000, I'm earning 10% on 110,000 because I had the interest or the money that I made the previous year. And so that year, when I do 10% on 110,000, I actually made $11, which doesn't sound like a whole lot. But then the next year happens, and then the next year happens, and that money over time, you start making money in your money because your money's making you return, and those returns back invested, then your money's making money in that money. All right. $182,000 divided by 60 is 3 years of retirement. Okay. So I want you to think of this. Remember, we were talking about the 4% rule, and we said that you can only withdraw a certain amount of money every single year because if you withdraw too much money, then you'll end up not having a principal. Well, if you saved every single day, every single week, $100, and you put it and you never did anything with it, right? That $100 would make you 182,000. And then if you're like, great, I have 182,000, I want to then go retire. How many years of retirement would you get if you were going to withdraw $60,000 a year? The answer to that question is 3 years because that's simple, 60,000 into 182. Okay. However, if you put that into an investment and that investment gets compounded interest, so now you have $785,000, and then you divide that by 60,000, the same amount of money for retirement, it equals 13 years of retirement. Okay. Guys, I know this is like super, super easy, right? And super basic, but this is going to be very important because these small nuances, as far as like money at 8% versus 9%, money that is invested or not invested, investing $100 versus $150, investing that for 35 years versus 10 years is literally the difference, can be the difference between you having, $40 million in retirement or $4. Okay. And so for some of you who are like, yeah, I got this, this is very basic, keep in mind that this course is for people that have no knowledge whatsoever, have not seen it. The main takeaway I want you to take from both of these two slides is that one small amount saved, even $100, right, a week can mean big amounts, almost close to $1 million, right, at the end of 35 years if you just simply put that money into an IRA and a 401k. That's the Dave Ramsey method, okay? And I'm gonna keep going back to those two methods, but the Dave Ramsey method here basically says is, listen, you're making $1,000, you're making pretty good money, close to $50,000 a year. I just want you to set aside 10% of that, put into traditional IRA, put into 401k, get a nice 8% return. And if you do that every single year, you will have a nice little nest egg at the end of it where you can retire stable. Remember the stats that we talked about. Most people in America, it was like, I forget what the number is, 60% of America have no retirement savings whatsoever. Even the people that do have like 100 grand. A lot of people aren't even doing this very basic thing. $100 a week, 10% saved of their income, and an 8% return for 35 years. At a bare minimum, that's what we should be doing. So, really interesting thing is I want you to think about another way is how very small decisions can add up to very, very big dollars. Another thing I want to talk to you about, not just compounded interest and whatever, how you can kind of tell how that makes up um, big amounts over a period of time. But even more so, the small little things that we do every single day can make huge, drastic impact. Remember when I talked about how if you had a good, strong circle of influence, that you needed that because I wanted you to brown bag stuff, or I might ask you to be a little bit frugal or not to spend so much, how the daily choices that you make, the small little nuanced choices can actually have a very big impact. Well, we're starting to get into some of that. And this is why having a strong circle of influence or people that are going in your same direction means drastic things to you becoming financially free. How much do you think a Starbucks coffee, like let's just say you said, you know what, I'm going to get a coffee every single day. And when I did this slides, this was a couple years ago. So Starbucks coffee was only about it was about $5. Okay. Right now, my Starbucks coffee, I think is $8.12 that I go get, which I never go get, even though I'm financially free, just because I just understand. I know this math. But if I was to say to you, 505 dollars a cup of coffee every single day, and you did that for, I don't know, 45 years. So from 25 to 65, you're like, you know what? I'm working. I deserve it. I just love their coffee. It looks great. It's great. And every time you just drove by, you swooped in, got a cup of coffee, and you went to work. How long? Would it be crazy if I said to you that just cutting off the one cup of coffee a day for $5, and instead, if you took that money and you put it into an S&P index fund and you did that over your entire life, you would equal $679,000 in retirement? That's the power of changing from the earn and consume lifestyle, or taking small bits of money and putting them to work for you over a period of time. That's the difference, to go back to the cash flow quadrant, is instead of being an employee and then trying to work really, really hard to then try to get self-employed because that's the way you're going to get rich. And then moving from self-employment to like, oh, I got to hire employees because that's the way that you're going to get rich. If all along the only thing that you did was just stop drinking coffee every single day and you put that into your IRA, and instead of spending the $100 on going out to eat or whatever, you took the 10%. So you made 1,000. You took the 10% and you put that away. Not only would you have in the previous example the $785,000, okay, saved because you were saving $100 a week, but if you added and you said, I'm also not going to get that coffee, I'm just going to drink water, whatever you decide to do, and I'm going to put that into it, you'd have an additional 679,000. That that is powerful math. I'm going to leave it there for this slide because we just covered a lot of information. If you don't really get these concepts, I want you to go back and rewatch it again, because what we're going to go into is a lot more complicated. Until next time.